want to invite you to go ahead and have a seat.
Well, hello, Crossroads, and man, I'm so glad that you're here in service today. Obviously, I am not. I'm currently in Kentucky, not only there for Thanksgiving this week, but also celebrating my dad's 70th birthday. I know what you're thinking. I think the same thing. It's why I always say that the older I get, the better looking he gets. That's me in 25 years. Now, all joking aside, before we jump into the sermon, I did want to take a quick opportunity just for a personal encouragement for you to remember Crossroads Church in your year-end giving. This may surprise some of you, but about statistically 40% of all charitable giving, and that includes giving to churches, happens in the months of November and December. And so because of that reason, if you call Crossroads home, I want to encourage you to deliberately, thoughtfully, even prayerfully think about your gifts coming into these final months of 2024. In the last couple of years, we've seen some pretty exceptional growth here at Crossroads. This year alone, we're up about 16% overall from this time last year. Just to give you an understanding of what that looks like, that's about 200 more people attending weekend services than this time last year. Pretty unbelievable. On top of that, in the last couple of months, we've had 23 baptisms, including the one that we experienced today with Ethan. All of this points to a really exciting future from Crossroads. We're running hard after the vision that God has given us to expand our kingdom impact locally and globally around the world as we become a church that's multi-ethnic, multi-generational, making disciples of the next generation, our kids and our grandkids. So with all of that said, the need to fund this exciting ministry before us has never been greater. In fact, two of those opportunities that we have happen during our Christmas Eve service. Every year, we take a Christmas Eve offering that goes to support a local partner as well as a global partner somewhere in the world. This year, our local partner that we've chosen is Beyond Home. Beyond Home is an amazing faith-based organization that began really being birthed out of this church in 1987 with a woman named Connie Zimmerman in response to the homeless crisis that was happening in Denver. Since then, in the next 35 or so years, thousands of families have been helped as Beyond Home has really been able to give housing as well as counseling services, food, all helping families really escape from poverty. It's an amazing organization, like I said, and we want to help them with $10,000 this Christmas Eve. The second partner that we have, I'm really actually personally excited about. Nathan Dankers is a young guy, just graduated college, who grew up here at Crossroads Church. He served in many of the ministries here at Crossroads. His family still attends almost every weekend. You can find them somewhere around here. Nathan Dankers, at a very young age, had a calling on his life to become a missionary. He heard that call from God, went to college, graduated, became accredited, and now is being endorsed by MAF, a missions organization that trains pilots to go into the deepest, most unknown places in the world to bring the hope of the gospel. In 2025, Nathan Dankers is going to be deployed to be a missionary. I mean, this is so exciting for me that someone here from Crossroads Church is going to be a missionary in the world. We want to help him get there. There's some initial cost to be able to get out onto the mission field, and this Christmas Eve, we want to raise the money for him. And so over the course of the next couple of weeks, you're going to get a chance to hear his story, and then on Christmas Eve, you'll have a chance to give to him. So with all of that said, here's my ask. That if you call Crossroads home, if you attend here regularly, if you are nurtured here, if you trust us spiritually, would you consider partnering with us financially towards the vision and mission that God has given to us? If you've never given to a church before, our Christmas Eve offering is an easy way for you to begin to be generous. And then I would just consider prayerfully asking God if that generosity needs to carry forward into 2025. Now, as you think about all of that, if you go to crossroadsabc.com/give, you'll find all the different ways that you can give to the church, whether that be through check or credit, stocks, even cryptocurrencies. Now, just a quick word that if you give stocks or cryptocurrencies, just know that we try to make that as easy as possible. There's no fees, and if you give through the church portal, there's no capital gains tax on any of that. And if you are giving stocks and cryptocurrencies, know that all of it gets liquidated and then comes to us in cash. We're not holding on to any Bitcoin, no matter how crazy it gets in the world. So I just want to say thank you for giving me the opportunity to have this moment. And personally, I want to thank the 456 families at Crossroads who give faithfully and consistently to this church. that you are the reason that we're able to do what we do. From these Sunday morning experiences, to the programs that we offer through this church, to the work that's happening in the community center, to supporting our partners all around the world. Thank you for your generous and consistent support to Crossroads Church. That's all I have for you. Anybody seen James? There he is. He has an awesome word for us. James, take it away.
All right, well, good morning, Crossroads. If you don't know me, my name's James, and I'm the pastor of spiritual growth here at Crossroads. And today is a standalone sermon. We're not in any sermon series, but I want to plant a seed in your life, in your mind, and in your heart today for something that we long to grow into as a church in the year and years to come. It's our desire as a church that deeper than anything we do physically in the world, that the Word of God would plant itself deep inside of each of us, that we would experience the love of God in a way that transforms us regardless of your background, regardless of what you've done, regardless of what's happened to you, that you would experience God personally and profoundly. And that the rhythms of the world that oftentimes feel like they're working against us coming fully alive, that we would literally step out of those rhythms and step into rhythm with God to experience life the way that He created us to experience. So today my goal is to just paint a picture of that and to whet your appetite for maybe where we're going. So as a starting place, a little bit about myself. I grew up in Northern California at the base of the Santa Cruz Mountains. I'm the middle child of 5 kids, and my dad grew up in the Midwest and was just able to fix, pretty much anything around the house. So the cool thing as a kid, growing up in the home I did, was we had this whole corner in the garage with all of my dad's tools. And from just a little guy, me and my buddies would always go on these adventures and projects together. We would build these rickety tree forts together, and one of my buddies fell out into a barbed wire fence. He's fine. We built BMX jumps and then kind of drew lots to see who would be the first person to try it out. And in the Santa Cruz Mountain, we had mountain lions and bobcats. So we actually tried to make cages to catch one of these. Because like in elementary school, one of my dreams was to show up like with a bobcat on a rope. Like how cool would that be, right? Amazing. And in all of these adventures, I would go to that corner in the garage and I would just look and I would eyeball and just figure out what tool looked like it could best accomplish whatever the task was before me. And it worked pretty well for me until the day that my dad asked me to help him replace a sprinkler in the yard. And he came home from work, he went in to change his clothes, and I kind of got to work on the project. And I grabbed his hammer, this is it, and he came outside and he saw me just banging the ground like a monkey, right? Trying to dig this out. And I remember him saying, "What the fill in the blank, right, are you doing with my hammer? You don't dig holes with a hammer." Well, the truth of the matter is, I dug holes with it. I broke up tree roots with it. I knocked down dead branches. I threw it at friends, right? I mean, like, I did a lot with that hammer, right? But as we think about that story and my childish ignorance, is it possible for us that we use things in our lives in ways that they weren't designed for? And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but is it possible that in the way that we engage things, the way we use them, that we misuse something, or we don't actually understand what the purpose it was created for is, right? It's probably pretty probable. So bringing this into an issue of faith and spirituality, what do you believe the purpose of the Christian experience actually is? Or posing it this way, what is the invitation of the Christian experience? Can we articulate it with clarity? Or could it be possible that we're using it for the wrong purpose? Kind of like a knucklehead kid and a hammer, right? And is that possible in our own lives? See, some would say that Christian faith, the goal of it is for salvation, that it's to secure a ticket to heaven someday. Some would say it's to become a good moral person and to raise good families with good values. Some would say that Christian faith is to lead us into prosperity, to experience our best life now, to somehow use the Bible and use faith as a life hack to get what we want out of life. Some would say that Christian faith is to dictate or influence the values of our culture, that through preaching, through legislation, and other forms, that we're supposed to steer the direction of our country and society. Others would say the purpose of Christian faith is simply to love everyone, right? Accept, affirm, celebrate how all people are wired and want to experience life. And still others say that the Christian faith is to help us detach from the desires of this world and prepare our hearts, our minds, even our bodies to spend eternity with God. Now, the tricky thing is all of these have a little bit of truth to them. But what is the question, or what is the invitation that Jesus actually invited us into, right? That's the right question, right? This is kind of his club, right? So what is he inviting us into? And that's what we're going to look at today. The scary thing is in this pursuit, we can't just pick and choose Bible verses that we like, right? Kind of like Instagram culture where we pull verses that align with us. We need to read the Bible as a whole to understand the whole invitation of Jesus. Similarly, this is why good theologians are so valuable to the church. Now, these nerdy nerds, they read the Bible like way deeper than you and I probably ever will. But the gift that they give us is they reveal the threads throughout the Bible that we might not see as we read it in our own lives, but that are very valuable to understanding the big picture. And one of these nerdy nerds is a guy that I've been following for years by the name of John Mark Comer. What I really appreciate about him is his thoughtful handling of the Bible, his deep, rich study of Christianity as a movement through history, and his deep respect, his humble respect for the spiritual giants of the past in the application of Christian faith today. And he's obsessively leaned into the question that we're looking at today: what is the purpose, the invitation of Christian faith? He's been leaning into that for decades, trying to crack the code and understand this from the Bible and from the movement of Christianity. And what he says in a book of the same title, he says the invitation is this: to practice the way of Jesus, to be with Jesus, to become like him, and to do as he did. The summary of the invitation of Jesus: to be with him, to become like him, and to do as he did. See, the most common literal invitation from Jesus found in the Gospels is "come follow me." Or other times he said, "repent, change your thinking and the direction of your life, and come follow me." Now, some might push back and say, wait a second, isn't the point of Christianity salvation? And it's true. Salvation is important because it clears away the offense between us and God. But I promise you, there is way more to the invitation of Jesus than fire insurance from hell or a golden ticket to heaven. The invitation of Christianity is to meet and get to know the God who took on flesh to dwell amongst us. In this knowing, we are saved and transformed. And in our time together today, I want to unpack those 3 points of this invitation of Jesus: to be with him, to become like him, and to do as he did. So starting with the first, being with Jesus. Christian faith is not just agreeing to a doctrinal statement. pledging membership at a specific church, or putting a sticker on your car. It's not a doctrinal statement or choosing a church or putting a vinyl sticker on the back of your car. As I shared earlier, Jesus said, "Come follow me." Or repent, change your ways, and come learn my ways. That's what Jesus is inviting us into. Now, many Christians quote John 3:16 as kind of a summary of the gospel. And it says this: "For God so loved the world that he gave his only son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have eternal life." John 3:16 is beautiful. But interestingly, the same John who captured these words from Jesus also wrote in 1 John 2:3-6, "And by this we know that we have come to know him, if we keep his commandments. Whoever says, 'I know him,' but does not keep his commandments is a liar, and the truth is not in him. But whoever keeps his words, in him truly the love of God is perfected. By this we may know that we are in him. Whoever says he abides in him ought to walk in the same way in which he walked." So according to Jesus' words and firsthand witnesses, what begins with believing, it works its way into every fiber and every aspect of our life to transform us. And according to John, the faithful witness, if this doesn't happen, there's something off in our knowing Jesus. See, truly knowing Jesus equals a transforming life. Not perfection, but a life that is being reformed into the likeness of Jesus. Now today, we throw the word Christian around pretty comfortable. It's how the world knows us, but that really hasn't always been the case. In the early days of Christianity, the word Christian was only found 3 times in the New Testament. It was actually more of a derogatory term. It just means little Christs. So a world used it to kind of put us down. The most common word that was used for followers of Jesus was disciples. That word shows up 269 times in the New Testament. Now, Professor Dallas Willard said the best descriptive word for disciple for our cultural understanding is the word apprentice. And Willard clarifies that we have been called to become apprentices of Jesus. So when you hear that word, apprentice, what comes to mind for you? For me, I think of men and women who are learning in the trades, maybe an electrician or a plumber. An apprentice follows and soaks up insights and lessons from their mentor. An apprentice seeks to learn daily what their mentor does in a variety of settings and situations. An apprentice is a sponge. They're eager to learn and excited to one day be able to do what their mentor does. And that's a picture of what Jesus invites us into as he calls us. So what does it look like if we want to follow Jesus and apprentice in his ways? Well, Jesus told us himself. In John 15, he tells us this: "Abide in me and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. Whoever abides in me and I in him, he it is that bears much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing." And this picture is pretty simple. What does it look like? It looks like we attach ourselves to Jesus, that we enter into rhythms with Jesus in how we live our life to experience and stay connected to him. Now, as a pastor, I have to be honest with you, this is the hardest part of our job. It's way easier to put on church services and to draw a crowd than it is to connect individuals this way to Jesus. It's way harder. And part of the problem is we all struggle with what does it look like to connect with Jesus? I mean, let's be honest. You can't really text Jesus and like meet him for coffee, right? Prayer is a little awkward, especially when you're trying to learn it. And the Bible, let's be honest, it's daunting, it's confusing, and dare I say, it can be pretty boring in some parts. And at the core of it, I think most people struggle discerning how God actually speaks to us in our daily lives. That's a common struggle that everybody has. And beyond all of that stands against us is this painful truth that if a person doesn't want to spend the effort or energy to learn what it looks like to be connected to Jesus, there's literally nothing I can do for you. I can encourage you, I can invite you, but unless you have the desire to connect with Jesus, you're going to be on the outside looking in. Spiritual giant G.K. Chesterton said this: "The Christian ideal has not been tried and found wanting. It has been found difficult and left untried." Is Chesterton right? Is that the truth for you and I? That the masses choose religious activity because connecting with Jesus just sounds too hard. Let me push a little bit. Is that your story? Is it possible that you keep God at some safe distance from your life because you know he's inviting you to more, but you just don't want to spend the energy? I think that's many people's situation. No shame. But we're forgetting that the invitation of Jesus, that Jesus desires each of us to come to get to know him personally and uniquely as a friend and as our guide. He longs to know you and he longs to know me. I became a Christian when I was 20 years old, and like most things in my life, I jumped in pretty passionately. I was excited, and the pastors at our church were just really great guys, and they inspired me. So I studied what they did, and I tried to do it. And all of them were wicked smart. You know, they were like, they knew the Bible in like front to cover so amazingly, and their offices had books everywhere. So I asked them what books they recommended, and I bought them, and I really tried hard to sit down with these commentaries and Bible dictionaries and be like them. And I failed miserably. I was so frustrated and disappointed. How could I ever get to know God if I couldn't get 2 pages into a commentary without falling asleep? And what I didn't realize was I was trying to connect with God the way that they knew him. I didn't ask the question, how does God want to get to know me? And that led to great frustration early on. Author Gary Thomas wrote a fantastic book called Sacred Pathways. And I found this book super helpful in this season and in seasons ever since. And in this book, he unpacks these historical pathways that men and women have encountered God from various personality types for generations. There's nothing special about it, just that we're all wired differently, and God loves us in our personality. He created us that way. So some of these pathways that he shares in the book are these. He shares about the naturalists, those who encounter God in nature. Traditionalists, people who meet God through ritual and symbols. Ascetics, those who experience God in solitude and simplicity. Activists, those who connect with God through pursuing social justice. Caregivers, people who see God by loving others. Enthusiasts, individuals who encounter God in mystery and worship. Contemplatives, people who commune with God through adoration and prayer. And intellectuals, those who know God with the mind. And as I've pursued God in my walk and gotten to know him, the incredible gift that I've gotten is I've actually gotten to know myself as well. The way that God wired me uniquely, and the way that he wants me to know him and experience his love. The big things I've learned is that I love the outdoors, and I am wildly drawn to the mystery of God. I desperately want to know God, but I do not want someone to explain away the mystery like a junior high science teacher explains an animal by dissecting it on a table. I want to play with the animal. I want to live in the wonder and awe. I'm personally drawn to the more mystical aspects of faith. Things like prayer, contemplation, the wonder of creation, and the beauty and messiness of the way God transforms our lives. I love that stuff. I was explaining this to a friend fairly recently, and he said, "So you're a mystic?" It's like, so what is that, like a wizard? And I said, no. It means that I want to pursue God. I don't want to figure him out. And there's a vast difference in the way I understand between those two things. See, I need to always know that God is beyond my ability to figure him out. And I want to always be in wonder and awe of his ways and who he is. That's what I'm in pursuit of. In my life, I stay close to Jesus by spending time with him in prayer, in the Bible, and in the outdoors. In prayer, I practice a variety of types of prayer. And most commonly, my goal as I pray is to just slow down and be aware of God's presence. When I open the Bible, I used to study a lot more than I do now. Now I read the Bible to get to know the heart of God, to get to know his love for us and his specific words that he has for me every day. And the outdoors, I love to fly fish and mountain bike and hike. And I encounter God in all of those. Believe it or not, I worship God as I fly fish, as I mountain bike, and I hike. And I cultivate intimacy with him while I do those. One of my favorite things to do is what I call prayer hiking. And I love getting to a trailhead at sunrise and start hiking when it's still dark out, and being alone on a trail as creation wakes up. And if you've done this, you know what I'm talking about. You see the flowers turn to the rising sun. It's the most holy experience that I have ever seen. I don't cry much, but I have been drawn to tears multiple times when I've been out there alone with God. It's really the only place that I feel small. And I love that feeling. But how do you encounter God? Or maybe the better question is, how might you explore where and how you could encounter God more fully within how he created you? Wouldn't that be fun to figure that out? And that's the core of this invitation of being with Jesus. The next part is becoming like him. As we apprentice with Jesus, we'll be influenced by him in various aspects of our life. And what you'll discover, this is a lifelong process, but you'll start to dislike things that break the heart of God, and you'll actually be drawn to things that make God happy. And you'll experience transformation in the midst of this. You'll learn and see how Jesus found peace, and you'll learn how to cultivate that in your own life. You'll see how his plans and values are actually for your good. And part of this journey as we apprentice with him is he will lovingly reveal things in your life that are out of order, not because he's mean, because he loves you too much to let you stay there. And it calls us to transforming rhythms that lead to destruction to new rhythms that lead to life. We'll see how Jesus discerned the voice of his Father and learn how you and I can hear his voice as well. We'll cultivate the ability to muster courage and strength to say yes to God when he asks us to do wild things, scary things. join the adventure that he called us to. And he will make us men and women who are honestly able to love unconditionally with less and less fear of loss or reservation. We become people that can give our lives away the way Jesus gave his life away. And when we apprentice with him, we will experience these things happening in and through our lives. The final thing I'd like to touch on is do as he did. What does that even mean? Well, in 1896, author Charles Sheldon wrote a book called In His Steps. Now, most of you have probably never heard of that book, and I get it, right? 1896, long time ago. But you probably know the question that book posed, and the question is this: WWJD, what would Jesus do? Right? A few decades ago, this was kind of a Christian trend. As I was a youth pastor, all my students had the bracelets, and it was as much of a fashion statement as it was a discipleship thing. And as good as the book and the question and the fashion statement might have been, John Mark Comer actually says, what would Jesus do is the wrong question. The right question is this: WWJDIHWM. Okay, it would probably suck as a bracelet, right? But it's a better question. What would Jesus do if he were me? And his reason is this: because Jesus lived in the first century in the Middle East. Jesus was a man. Jesus was a rabbi living in a primarily Jewish culture. Jesus was single. And don't forget, Jesus was God. But if we ask WWJDIHWM, it's growing on me, guys, I'll be honest. What would Jesus do if he were a woman? Or if he were a person raising a family, living single, or after a divorce? A person struggling with the pressures of modern culture and 24/7 digital influence. The work and economic pressures of living in North Denver. A person living in a post-Christian culture where literally nothing is out of bounds, and our culture is encouraging us to live your own truth. The confusion of trying to raise kids in a toxic and unhealthy world. Someone struggling with depression or mental health. A person experiencing the difficulties of marriage. A person desiring above all to be married. A retired person or an empty nester looking at a unique season of life before them. A man or woman with a wounded self-image because of something you did or something that was done to you. Or a person struggling with a deep hurt, an addiction, or a lifelong hang-up. You see, being with Jesus opens a door for you and I to learn from Jesus how to live his life in our unique skin and life circumstances. He'll lead us into it. He'll coach us through it. He'll give us strength to do it. And he will transform us in our footsteps where we go. And that is the invitation. So I know I threw a lot at you today. So what do we do with this? Like what's the takeaway with this idea of being with Jesus? Well, I want you to consider, think about, pray about the actual invitation of Jesus to us. What would it look like for you to re-envision your faith as an invitation to simply be with Jesus? To see your life as an opportunity to apprentice with Jesus, that when you go to school or work or an activity you're engaged in, that you're literally bringing Jesus with you and you're cultivating a conversation with him of how he wants to use that to transform us into men and women that look like him. How would that be different than your life right now? What would it cost you to live this way? And the better question, what might you gain? The flip side of the invitation is worthy to consider too. If we don't become like Jesus, what will we become? Let that soak in. If we don't become like Jesus, seriously, what will we become? Many people will simply become what the culture around us wants us to become. The truth is, we're all being discipled, okay? It's just being done by marketing firms. And unless you choose who you apprentice under, we're all on a conveyor belt of pursuing the things that the culture around us tells us to pursue. So that choice is yours. Another is we could become what the culture invites us to become in living your own truth. It sounds nice enough, though nobody actually knows what that means or where that leads. Being our own guide, it leads us on a path that is unknown. And what we're seeing, the people that are inviting us into this, it leads to relational fractures, despair, and deeper human pain and suffering. God loves us, but he wants to be our guide. And the third option, if we don't become like Jesus, we'll pursue a version of Christianity that actually brings no life. See, hitting church when you can or picking and choosing the verses that we like, it sounds all well enough. The problem with that is that you're not an apprentice of Jesus. You're still your own God. And if we walk down that road, that path doesn't actually lead to salvation, and it sure as heck doesn't lead to transformation. Because we remain in control and we resist the actual invitation of Jesus. So our desire for you and for Crossroads, we want to be a people that just desire more. That if there's an offer on the table from Jesus, we want to walk up and sign our name. Let's go on an adventure together, and let's pursue what this would look like. Matthew 11, from the paraphrase, the message, puts it so beautifully. He says this: "Are you tired, worn out, burned out on religion? Come to me. Get away with me, and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly." I mean, come on. I don't know your story. I don't know where you're coming from, but who doesn't want that, right? Who doesn't want to escape the rat race or to recover our life the way it was created to be, to learn how to take a real rest, to learn these unforced rhythms of grace, whatever that looks like, and to live freely and lightly. So my encouragement for you as we finish 2024 and as we walk into the new year, pray. If this stirs something in your heart, if this excites you, pray into that. Ask God to meet you in that hunger and see where he wants to take you. Maybe you're listening and you're like, "Will that guy stop? I want out." Pray about that. Okay? What are you resisting? And why wouldn't you want to experience this? See, Christians or disciples of Jesus have long used the phrase, "Jesus saves." And that is absolutely true. But it means so much more than just getting to heaven. See, Jesus saves us from the sin that separated us from God, and he saves us to the fullness of life he offers us, the life we were created for. Jesus saves us from the patterns of shame and fearful living, and he saves us to rhythms that will give us life. Jesus saves us from trying to be our own God and saves us to discovering what life looks like living under his care. Jesus saves us from living for our own glory, and he saves us to our lives being a billboard where he literally transforms us real time in front of other people, where our life is a beacon to where hope comes from. Now, come on. Who doesn't want that? And we want that for you. So there's a couple ways that you can investigate today or any Sunday here at Crossroads. There's a table in the lobby where it says Jesus on the wall. We call it the Jesus table. And there's volunteers there who are there to field any questions that you might have. They'll give you a free Bible if you want to start there, or if you have a question. They're safe people to begin that conversation. So I'd encourage you. You can go talk to them after service. Maybe you'd like to shoot us a text. You can text this number. We're going to throw it on the screen. Text the keyword Jesus, and we'll respond and meet you there in your seeking and looking. But if your heart's turning, invite God into that space.